Hi, I'm Nate Savage, and welcome to Lesson 8 of the Rhythm Guitar Quick Start series. Now, so far, we've been going over power chords and bar chords and how to move them all around the fretboard. But no rhythm guitar series will be complete without some open chords. So in this lesson, I'm going to teach you some of the most essential open chords that you're going to need to know as a rhythm guitar player. Bar chords and open chords often go by the same name, but they sound very different. So for example, you have your G bar chord right here that you can use, or you can use an open G chord too. Not only do they sound different, but they can be played on different locations on the fretboard. So depending on what it is you're playing, you may want to use a bar chord at some time, and you may want to use your open chord at other times. It's important to know both just to give yourself some tonal options and a greater amount of freedom on the guitar. The open chords we're going to be learning in this lesson are G major, C major, D major, E major, E minor, A major, A minor, B, and F. You already kind of know the F and B chords because I'm just going to be teaching you the bar chord shapes for them. I thought it was important to include those in this lesson because they're right down here by where all of your open chords are. If you already know those chords, that's fine, but I would encourage you to watch the entire lesson because I'm going to be giving you some tips on making your chords sound clean and your chord transition sound smooth. This is going to be a lot of information, so don't feel like you have to have all of these chords down before you move on to some other things. Just take one or two at a time, work on them, incorporate them into your daily practice routine. Once we go through all these open chord shapes, we're going to apply them to some of the popular chord progressions that we went over in a previous lesson. So let's jump right in. The first chord we're going to be learning is an open G chord, and there's two fingerings that I'm going to show you for this chord. One uses your first, second, and third fingers, and the other one uses your second, third, and fourth fingers. A lot of newer players use this shape for their G chord just because it's easier than using your pinky. But let's go through both real quick. Put your second finger on the third fret of the low E string, right behind the fret, right down on the very tip of your finger. Then your first finger is going to grab the second fret of the A string, right behind the fret again. And then your third finger is going to grab the third fret of the high E string. And that's your open G major shape. You can strum all 6 strings for this chord. That's the first way that I told you you can make this chord. The second way is to use the exact same shape, but use your second, third, and fourth fingers instead of your first, second, and third. And the advantage to using that fingering for this chord is it's really easy to get to a C chord, an open C chord, which is a really common change. So that leads us into our second chord shape, which is a C major chord. So put your first finger on the first fret of the B string, second finger on the second fret of the D string, then your third finger is going to grab the third fret of the fifth string. And for this chord, you leave the low E string out, you don't play it at all. And a lot of people have trouble reaching out and grabbing the third fret with their third finger. That's the biggest trouble spot for this chord for most newer players. So what you want to do is make sure that you have some good posture going on with your hand. If you're having trouble reaching that, bring your elbow down. It puts your hand in a better position to come grab that note with your third finger. Next open chord we're going to look at is an open D major chord. And let me just show it to you real quick. You're only going to use the top 4 strings for this chord. Put your first finger on the second fret of the G string. And your second finger is going to grab the second fret of the high E string. Your third finger is going to grab the third fret of the B string. And you're going to leave the low E and A strings out. Just strum the top 4 strings. And a problem a lot of players run into with this chord is that their fingers are so scrunched up here that they end up muting the surrounding strings. For example, your third finger can really easily mute this high E string if you're not careful. So you're going to want to make sure to come right down on the very tips of your fingers. Next chord we're going to learn is our open E major shape. And if you've already learned your bar chords, then you already know this chord shape. If not, here it is right here. You can strum all 6 strings for this chord shape. Put your first finger on the first fret of the G string. Your third finger is going to grab the second fret of the D string. And your middle finger is going to grab the second fret of the A string. Strum all 6 strings. And again, your fingers will probably feel pretty scrunched up. Make sure you're not muting any of the surrounding strings and coming down right on the tips of your fingers. And one tip that I want to give you here as far as switching between chords smoothly is to make sure that you have whatever chord shape you're working on down really well, where you can go right to it before you start trying to switch between that chord and another chord. The next chord we're going to look at is an open E minor chord. And this one is really easy if you know your open E major chord. All you have to do is take your index finger off of that first fret of the G string, and that gives you an open E minor chord. So one thing that I recommend doing is just switching between an open E major and an open E minor. All right, the next chord on our list is an open A major chord. And if you know your bar chord, you already know this, but let's go over this just in case. Put your first finger on the second fret of the D string. Then you're going to come scrunch your second finger right up here on that same fret, but on the G string. And then you're going to get even tighter in here with your third finger on the second fret of the B string. You have to really scrunch your fingers up to get in there. And leave the low E string out for this chord. The next tip I want to give you for transitioning between chords and making that smooth is to anticipate the next chord and try to visualize and feel that chord before you actually need to move to it. So if I'm switching between an E major and an A major, and I know in about 2 bars that A major is coming up, I want to be thinking about it, what that chord feels like and what that chord looks like, so I don't get surprised by it. If you get surprised by it, you might not hit it clearly. If you're thinking about it a little bit in advance, you can visualize it, feel it, and go right to it. All right, on to an A minor, an open A minor chord. So again, if you know your bar chords, you know that an A minor looks just like that. We're basically taking this note with our third finger and moving it back 1 fret, but we have to change our fingering to do that a little bit. So come back here with your index finger on the first fret of the B string. Third finger is going to grab the second fret of the G string, and your middle finger is going to grab the second fret of the D string. And you're going to leave the low E string out. And that's your open A minor chord. And one thing that helped me to remember this chord is that it feels just like an E major chord shape, but it's moved over 1 string set. So let's move on to our F major chord. And like I said earlier, we're going to be using a bar chord for this F major chord. So put your index finger across all 6 strings on the first fret. Then the rest of your bar chord is going to fall in place. Your middle finger is going to grab the second fret of the G string. Pinky is going to grab the third fret of the D string. And your third finger is going to grab the third fret of the A string. Make sure that you have good bar placement back here right behind the fret, and kind of on the bony edge of your finger instead of the soft middle part right there. And if you wanted to make this F major into an F minor, all you have to do is take your middle finger off and you'll have an F minor. All right, the last chord we're going to go over is a B major bar chord. Get your first finger set up on the second fret of the guitar right there, and your root note is right here on the second fret of the A string. So that's your bar, and the rest of your bar chord is going to fall in place. So your second finger is going to be on the 4th fret of the D string, third finger is going to be on the 4th fret of the G string, and your pinky is going to grab the 4th fret of the B string. Try to relax as much as possible when you're making these chords, and if your guitar seems like it's just really hard to play, you might want to go have it set up by a professional. It's pretty inexpensive, and it can make your guitar play as easily as possible. And again, if you want to turn this B major chord into a B minor chord, all you have to do is kind of make the switch with these 3 fingers that are making the A shape into an A minor shape. So take some time and get these shapes down. It doesn't have to be overnight or even over a couple of weeks. Don't try to tackle too many at once, and don't try switching between these chord shapes before you have the individual shapes down. That can be really frustrating. Once you have these chords down, you can start applying them to some of the more common chord progressions that we went over in the last lesson. So for example, instead of playing a 1-4-5 with bar chords, you can use your open chords to do that. So G, C, D. So that's the 1-4-5 progression using open chords. We can also do the 1-5-6-4 chord progression that we went over using open chords too. So in the key of G, with bar chords, it would be G, D, E minor, C. If we did that with open chords, do the exact same thing, G, D, E minor, C. It gives you quite a different sound, and it gives you some options that you can choose from depending on what kind of sound you kind of want to portray in your playing. Now it's time to apply these open chords to some real music. So pull up the jam track for this lesson. It's basically just the drum loop that you can use to work on these chord progressions using your open chords. The 1-4-5, the 1-5-6-4. Or, believe it or not, now you know most of the chords for the key of G major, all except for one. If you know G, A minor, B minor, C, D, E minor, and the 7 chord, the last chord in the key of G major, is a bit of an oddball, so don't worry about that one. Just focus on those 6 chords and try mixing them up. Come up with your own chord progressions too. Here's an example of how I would apply the 1-4-5 and the 1-5-6-4 chord progression to this jam track using these open chords. Thanks for watching this lesson. I hope you got a lot out of it. In the next lesson, we're going to go over some fundamental strumming patterns that are going to serve as the building blocks for a lot of the strumming patterns you're going to learn in the future. If you have any questions, you can email me, Nate@guitarsystem.com, or just leave a comment here on the page, and I'll get back to you there. See ya.